Hello again! In the last video, we wrapped up work on the client-side visuals and particle effects for this project. And so now we are going to turn our attention to a different kind of output on the client, and that is the HUD. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about our HUD methodology, our approach to this implementation, and then we're going to set everything up in code. And in the following video, we will actually get in the editor and put it all together. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is figure out how we're going to implement the HUD. Now, Epic's version of this tutorial, they put it in the game mode directly. Well, that's not going to work for us because, as we've discussed, the game mode is only existing on the server. It doesn't exist on the clients, so that's not really going to be an option. So we need to find a different solution. For a multiplayer game, so let's switch over to Visual Studio and see what we could find if we just look around a little bit in the engine. Now, our game mode derives from the game mode base class. So what I'm going to do is just do a little searching. I'm going to hit Control semicolon in Visual Studio to bring up, put my cursor over here in this find bar, and I'm going to put in game mode.cpp, and then that'll just find it for me real quick. Then I'm going to go ahead and open that, and now we're just going to search for something that might be relevant, the HUD. Now, this doesn't always yield results, and in fact, it turns out that you can search for various keywords. Maybe you could do this on Google as well, but just poking around the engine will give you some familiarity with it, and a targeted search like this allows you to look at some stuff in context, which is nice. So rather than trying to read this whole file, we're actually looking for something specific. Here is a HUD class, and it turns out, excuse me, the game mode already has a HUD class variable. So we can probably use that. Now let's see what else we find. If we just continue to search, we find a few uses of it. And here, this handles setting a HUD and may spawn the player pawn. Start new player. So let's mouse over that and hit F12. That goes to our implementation of start new player. Passing in a player controller. We tell the client what HUD class to use. So we tell the client set HUD. Ooh, looks promising. Let's hit F12, and that takes us to the header file, not the implementation, and we see that this sets the client's class of the HUD. Excellent. So it looks like this is handled in the player controller. So the game mode has the HUD class, and the player controller is actually going to be where we set the HUD. Great. This is blueprint callable, so we went to the header file, and there's the squiggly line saying that there is no implementation of this function. Okay, so what we need to do then is search, Control-Shift-F to search everything for the implementation. And we'll let that search run for a minute, and sure enough it finds the player controller implementation. If we have a HUD, destroy it, set our spawn parameters, blah, 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 blah. My HUD, get world spawn actor of type HUD, passing in the HUD class and those spawn parameters. Okay, great. So here is what we needed. So we know that the game mode already has the HUD class, so we'll define it there. We'll go ahead and use that existing variable. And the player controller is where we keep the HUD. So we are going to use that whole thing. Now, we are also going to use the type A HUD. We're going to derive from that. So we're not going to just make it a widget. In fact, let's take a moment to just talk about that methodology that we're going to use for our project. I'm going to flip over to a slide and tell you that we're going to make a multiplayer HUD. And I want you to think of this HUD as both a container and a driver. So it is going to be a container in that we're going to have all of these various widgets that will go on the HUD or in the HUD. And the HUD is going to help drive all of those things. So turning things on, turning things off. We will interact with our HUD, which will help drive all of those various widgets that we will add in this project and in future projects. So, in this project, we'll add this power bar that will tell us how much power we have. And then we'll add some message text to that widget, which will also tell us things like, play and game over and stuff. But suppose in a future project we wanted to add another widget. Maybe we wanted to add something that had health and stamina or magic or something. So we have a whole stats bar over here. Well, we're just going to add that as a widget or a collection of widgets into the HUD. And then maybe we get rid of the power bar. But in any case, the idea is whether we're adding things like hotbars and message text or taking things away and adding inventory and whatever, the HUD itself is a persistent container and driver for all of these widgets and all of these things that will make up the HUD. That is going to be our approach to this, to solving this problem. So we need to go ahead now and set up some of our scaffolding and code necessary for all of this to work, and then we will get on with making the actual HUD. So back in Visual Studio, I'm going to hit this X to get rid of that, and then I'm going to just back out of this to collapse that, all of that. Just clean that up a little bit so I have my view. And we need to go into our build file. I'm just going to expand this so we can see these a little better. I'm going into build.cs, where we need to enable UMG. So we need to hit a comma and add another string to this array for UMG. And then, excuse me, we also need to add another line. So we need some private dependency module names added. So we'll put a new line, private dependency module names dot add range, and this is also a string array, so new string array, and the values that we pass in are slate and slate core. Okay, now that nicely reformats for us. Okay, then the other piece of scaffolding we need to change is in our game header. Switch over to that, and we need to change engine minimal to engine. If you haven't already done that, we need to change that now. And so that is it for the scaffolding. And the other thing we want to do is, as I mentioned, we're going to add a power bar that's going to take us, that's going to show the player's power from 0 to the amount of power necessary to win the game. Well, we haven't defined that power level to win the game, so let's go ahead and do that now so that we have it out of the way. In order to do that, we're going to switch over to our game mode, and we're going to make this a variable in the protected section. It's a float. We'll call it power to win. This is just like Epic's version of this tutorial. It is a U property, and we're going to make it blueprint read write. We might want to, and we'll put it in the power category, because we might want to be able to tweak this to make the game more difficult or something like that. And we're going to go ahead and add this is the power level needed to win the game. To win the game. Okay, so now we have our power to win, and we're going to need to add an accessor for that. So let's go ahead and do that. Float get power to win, and it is, oh look, we'll just copy this. It's blueprint pure and in the power category. We'll copy that from get decay rate, and then we'll add our note. This is access the power level required to win the game. A little verbose, but whatever. Okay, so now we have that set up, and we need to set the value of power to win. Now, just like in Epic's implementation of this, let's go over to the CPP file, and we want to add power to win, but it's going to be based on the player's initial power, just like in Epic's version of this tutorial. Well, the only time we know that we have a player available to get is going to be not in the constructor, the game mode, but in begin play. So we're going to drop down here to begin play, and here's where we need to get the player and get the player's initial power so that we can use that to base our math on. Now, unfortunately, Epic's version of the tutorial, they just sort of grab, you know, the player because they can assume there's one. In our case, we have a number of players, so we need to find one. And the way we're going to do that is the same way we did it with draining power over time. We're going to grab an iterator, cast them to player controllers, cast those to battery characters, and then we will be able to get initial power from there. So I'm going to copy that block of code and paste it, then close all these braces. So now here in the very inner if check, we have a battery character, so we can get the character's initial power. So here we're going to set power to win equals, let's get the battery character's initial power, and we're going to multiply that times, just like Epic does, just a hard-coded value of 1.25 for now, and that's fine. Now, the other thing is, Oh, we need to get access to world. So let's grab that code block where we grab the world. Do that right there. Okay. And okay, so once we have the power to win set, we don't need to iterate through every player controller and set it again, because it's always going to be the same for now. So what we're going to do is bail out of this for loop by typing in break. And that's just going to go and get the first player controller we run into, grab the initial power value, and then break out of the loop and exit the function, because we're done. So that's all we needed to do there. So now we have the actual scaffolding all set up. We have the power to win variable available now, so we'll be able to use that later. And we've set up everything we need to do. So now all we need to do is actually go into the editor and create the HUD class itself. So let's go ahead and knock that out. Flipping back over to the editor, and what I'm going to do is actually hit compile while we're doing that. What we're going to do is create this HUD class. We're going to derive it from the base class HUD, but for this we're not going to do anything with it in C++. We're just going to create that class and then use it. So let's go ahead and wait for this to finish compiling. And then what we'll do is, like I said, we'll create this base class for the HUD, and then we'll move on from there. Because once we create the base class, we're going to actually create a blueprint version of that, so that we have access to it in blueprint and we can mess with it there. Oh, and a compile failed. Let's take a look at what I did wrong. And it looks like unresolved external symbol, get power to win. Oh, we forgot to implement get power to win. Nope. Let's flip back over here, go back to our game mode, get power to win, hit control period, enter, see if that'll create that implementation for us, and then we'll just put in power to win. Save, exit, escape, and then we should be good. Flip back over, compile. Okay, so I forgot to add the implementation of that power to win function, the get power to win. Okay, so now that's done, we're good to go. Okay, so now that we have a clean compile, everything's working, let's go ahead and create our HUD class. So we're just going to right click, create a new C++ class, and scroll down and we'll find the HUD. There it is, next. And we're going to call it NMP Network Multiplayer Game HUD. NMP Game HUD. Looks pretty good. Create. Okay, and that will once again compile the code for hot reload in the editor. Then we will be able to flip over to Visual Studio and see that class. Now, that's all done. I'm just going to switch over to Visual Studio and you'll see here's our HUD class. There's not much boilerplate. Just sort of a shell, and that's okay. We're not actually going to do anything with it for now. So we're just going to leave it there. We're good. We can switch back over to to the editor, excuse me, and we're going to go ahead and create the blueprint version. So let's click back in our classes, go to NMP Game HUD, right-click on it, create blueprint class based on this, and as I said, I like to use BP underscore. NMP Game HUD, we'll put it in the blueprints folder and hit create. That's going to actually create that for us, and we will go ahead and close that for a moment. Now we've got the blueprint, so now what we need to do is tell the game mode. So we need to say, hey game mode, this is the blueprint class you're going to use. Now we could do that in the editor, but since we're doing things in C++, we're going to go ahead and put it there. So what we need is a path to this. So I'm going to right click on the blueprint and then just go to copy reference. Then we'll switch back over to Visual Studio, and here we'll go into our game mode and we're going to set the set the HUD class just like we do. You can see the player pawn class is set up above. So we're going to call static constructor helper F class finder, but this is type A HUD, and then it's the player HUD class, and we'll pass in a text macro, and this is where we just paste that reference. And we need to clean it up a little bit because we don't need the single quote, closing single quote. We don't need what's after the period, and we don't need the blueprint part. There we go. So it just says /game/blueprints/bp_np game HUD. Close that off with a semicolon. Oh, it's constructor helpers plural. There we go. And now we'll just check it. So if player HUD class does not equal null, then we're going to say HUD class, and that's the variable in the game mode base class. So we're just going to use that. If player HUD class does not equal null, the HUD class equals player HUD class dot class. Okay. Player HUD class. Okay. Oh, it's if player HUD class. Sorry, we need the dot class part. That's why it was giving me the squigglies. Dot class. There we go. Okay. If player HUD class dot class does not equal null, then we set it. Okay. And this, I'm just going to put a note here. So this is where we set the type of HUD used in the game. Okay. So now we've done that, and when the game starts, we know that the game mode will go ahead and tell the player controller to set this HUD class as well and spawn an instance of it. So now we should be able to just go into the editor in the next video and actually construct this HUD. So I will see you when we get there. But first, before I bail out, let's just make sure, I'm going to switch back over to the editor and hit compile just to make sure that's all taken care of. Okay, so while that's happening, I will say once again, okay, now we've got that all done. Our plan is ready, and we've done all of our scaffolding. So now we're going to, in the next video, actually create the HUD here in the editor and start setting up that side of the visuals. So I will see you in that next video.